Greetings. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we thank Allah for coming to us in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom praises are due forever. We thank Allah for giving to us the Messiah, the living exalted Christ, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and we further thank Allah for blessing us with our divine leader, teacher, and guide, and warner in our midst, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. It is in their names that I greet you with the greeting words of peace of Assalamu alaikum, and the appropriate response would be wa alaikum salam, and unto you be peace. I am Sister Alice Muhammad, your host of TheSureTruth. I'm going to be very brief. We have a series of videos that I would like to share with us on the topic of justifiable homicide. Let me say that justice is something we cannot live without. We cannot live without justice. Justice is a prerequisite to life. It is one of the internal principles that the Creator of the heavens and the earth has decreed, that we cannot live without justice. So as we view these videos, let us keep in mind that justice comes from God Himself, and He does and will invoke His will on those who do not give justice. I greet you as I came before you with the greeting words of peace of Assalamu alaikum.
The answer is no. Don't have a clue. Most black people on the planet have absolutely no clue that this is what's going on. None. Zero. Zilch. This is why I put that slogan, that quote, in the front of the book. If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will confuse you. And black people are the most confused people on the planet. Confused about everything. We're looking at this world around us and we're totally confused, because that world is made by the white supremacists. And they are the greatest confusers on the planet. They are masters of confusion. How else can you control people over a long period of time without confusing them? It's an absolute must. Otherwise, you have to stand over each individual with a gun all day. The white supremacists don't do that. They stand over them with a gun every now and then. But on a day-to-day basis, they got everybody on automatic. Robots.
It seems bizarre to have to ask the question, does America have a race problem? All the evidence says yes.
But not everyone in the US agrees. Surveys consistently show that while most black people believe race is an issue, most white people don't. A divergence of opinion that existed even at the height of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Most white people didn't understand what Martin Luther King was trying to do. So, I'm going on a journey into the mind of white America.
It could be a bumpy ride, according to Talk Radio.
The value in black life, given the illegitimacy rate, out-of-wedlock rate, is far higher than that of the rest of the society. The reason that people have children before they marry is values, not poverty.
Blacks are stupid. That is correct. They are blinded by anger at whites.
You don't need to say white lives matter, because white people don't walk up to white people, put a gun to their head and blow them away.
I didn't want to talk to any African Americans for this film. Discrimination is obviously a black issue, but when you think about it, it's mainly a white problem. So I set my own color bar.
Bam, 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 bam. And you know it's coming from those areas. And then the next day the news will come on, and sure enough, there was a shooting of some young black man.
I'm part of the problem, because I don't know how to solve the problem, and so what do? I ignore it.
After a while, the race card has been played so much that it has lost its value.
If you think racism doesn't exist, you're white.
Welcome to white, affluent Milwaukee, home to some of the most expensive real estate in America, all groomed lawns and tended yards. But just a few minutes' drive away are pockets of despair. This is Black Milwaukee, home to 70% of African Americans living in the state of Wisconsin. It's poor, run down, undesirable. Professor Mark Levine from the University of Wisconsin gave me a tour and explained how over several decades, mortgage lenders and estate agents steered different races to different parts of the city.
You know, they could sort of deny outright racism by simply saying, well, this is just a hard-boiled economic analysis. We know that African Americans are a greater credit risk and they're not going to, pay back these loans, and so we're not going to make those loans. A study was done about a decade ago by the city to look at exactly that issue, and they found that a white household with income around $25,000 a year had about the same rejection rate for housing loans as a black family with income over $125,000 a year.
And the result of racism in mortgage lending is segregation. And that in turn fuels poverty, poor schools, and so on, as investors turn their backs on black areas. Neighborhoods are left to rot. Meanwhile, in white Milwaukee,
people who don't even live in the neighborhood tend to walk through here because it's pleasant on the eyes and it's a comfortable place to be. It's safe. But on the other hand, just up a couple of blocks, I can, especially through the summer, hear gunshots, bam, 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 bam.
So if I was to ask you then, what is your view of those African Americans living in that area? What would that be based on? Because it's not on personal contact,
right.
is it?
Honestly, most of it is based on what I see on the news, which unfortunately is a lot of negative.
What I'm saying is I'm part of the problem. Because I don't know how to solve the problem, and so what do? I ignore it.
Do you think a lot of people do that?
Yeah, sure. Well, certainly it's much easier to not know people. If you don't know people, you don't have to accommodate people.
these Americans enjoy a privilege. They can avoid the unpalatable. They live comfortable lives in nice areas because they're white.
And the advantages white people enjoy, the privileges they have, are endless. Academics and educators now believe it's the lack of awareness within the white community of these inbuilt advantages that taints white attitudes to race.
So white privilege is growing up in a society not understanding that not everyone has benefits that are unearned as a result of being in white skin. It may mean that because my name is Martha Berry, people are going to see that as a white name and say, let's get her an interview.
Martha works for a non-profit organization that helps clients and businesses overcome racial bias.
It would be great to hear what prompted you to come to this class.
Today, she's reviewing the progress made by 3 former students.
White males actually have a culture. You know, they think white male is the culture, right? There's a story that says fish don't know they swim in water. Right? Yeah. So white males don't know they live in a white male-dominated culture. And that was the biggest awakening. And once you knew that, then you could understand that there was institutionalized racism.
It forces you to reflect as a white person on what your role is in working to eliminate racism.
You feel that moment of, I am so clueless because I've just assumed that many people have these same opportunities. And I intellectually knew differently, but you realize for me at that moment how isolated I was in that.
Good morning, Wisconsin. You're listening to News Radio 620 WTMJ. I'm Charlie Sykes.
This is one of the most important men in right-wing talk radio in Wisconsin. Charlie Sykes has a legion of listeners, and most are white, suburban, and Republican.
Do you think many of your listeners understand the concept of white privilege? Have they come across that idea?
I think they've heard the term. I don't think they fully grasp it. I'm not sure that I fully grasp it. I actually had a caller the other day who asked me about that, and I asked him to try to define it.
And the caller did a pretty good job.
Well, I've noticed that I have a few African-American friends. One of my good friends, he's been pulled over at least 15 times, and I have never been pulled over before.
Okay, so you think that is your white privilege? Maybe it's because, I don't know, just the theory here, you don't speed, you don't violate traffic laws?
He
Is that
doesn't do
possible?
any of those things.
All right.
One of the things that we're seeing in American politics is you have a lot of white, working class, poor people who do not feel that they are privileged because of their race.
So, as far as you're concerned, there is no such thing as white privilege. It doesn't exist?
No, there's white privilege, there's all kinds of privilege. There's a reluctance to go back to the racialization of all of these issues. I mean, we do have an African-American president in this country. After a while, the race card has been played so much that it has lost its value.
The election of Barack Obama distorted the debate on discrimination. For many white people, he marked the end of America's conversation on race. For black people, his success actually marked the beginning. And these are some of those for whom the so-called race card has been played out. White, working-class males flocking to Donald Trump.
We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
Any discussion of white privilege must account for the problems of the poor and working class. But few would argue it's easier to be poor and white in America than poor and black.
White privilege, I just don't see it. You know what you need?
White privilege glasses. Helps you see the world the way we do.
There's a growing awareness of how corrosive white privilege can be. This video caused a storm online and was produced under the direction of Alice Hunt and her team.
Put those on. Okay, so what do you see then?
I see confusion and disruption in my normal way of looking at the world. And that's what we intended to do with these glasses. We wanted to encourage people to start thinking about what it might be like to be in someone else's shoes.
My journey into the mind of white America has been an eye-opener. I can now better understand how some people can blithely be unaware of the racism around them, be able to push it to one side, push the chaos to the backs of their minds. But is that an excuse for society not doing anything? No.
If our position as black people, if we had took the position, if in fact we are in a system, in other words, this is our position as a people. If in fact we are in a system of racism, white supremacy, not a system of democracy, there will be more and more killings of black people, black men in particular, by the system. Instead of being shocked, why did it happen again? We say, if in fact we are in a system of racism, white supremacy, we will continue to see this carnage. And again, for the white people who say they are not racist, it's your job to get out there and stop it.
I'm trying to figure out how to start this. There have been a lot of tears in my morning, a lot of frustration, and a lot of hurt and confusion. And my heart is just beating so fast because I feel like no matter what is said, my arms are shaking. No matter what is said, someone will be hurt. But I just feel like something has to be said. And so I'm just gonna say it. And I hope you understand that no matter what color you are, I love you very, very much. And I hope that this is received the way that it's intended. I can't imagine what it's like to be born with skin that's black, not white. I wasn't born rich, but don't get it twisted. See how I look? My white skin is my privilege. I don't get watched when I go to the mall. If I get stopped for a ticket, it doesn't end in a brawl. I don't know what it's like to go out for snacks and end up lying dead on my back. My car's never been watched or followed around. My kids don't play in parks and then get gunned down. I don't know anyone murdered for selling cigs or CDs. I've never been choked out or shot at by corrupt men in PDs. So I won't pretend to know how you feel, but I have something to say that's true and that's real. And I'm sorry for how we've behaved, starting the very moment that you were enslaved. Since we came in our boats and shackled your hands and shipped you back here to work on our land. I'm sorry for scars you bore then and bear now because of wounds we have caused or allowed. To black women, I'm sorry we've made you a commodity, using your bodies in secret like a back alley hobby. I'm sorry your kids watched while you were mistreated. I'm sorry your husbands have been broken and beaten. To black children, I'm sorry that we've made you believe that you are worth less and you couldn't achieve the same heights as the white kids that are in the same class because you are so smart and you are not trash. To black men, I weep because my heart breaks for you. The mass has been judged for the acts of a few. You've done the best with the hand you've been given. White people, don't leave, don't exit out. Please just listen. I know it's uncomfortable, but you must hear me out. This really is something that we must talk about. I know the history. Don't say it's not true. The past doesn't disappear when it's offensive to you. White Americans would say we're not all the same. Don't lump us together. I have my own name, and that's true. I get it. Not everyone is. But to say race isn't an issue perpetuates myth. To you, I would say that blacks aren't either. Please open your eyes and be a perceiver. Because if you would just look and be honest right now, you'd see that their mistreatment is what we've allowed. We act like they're poor and less than and gross. We make fun of their hair and their skin and their clothes. We reject them as people, but their culture we keep, like their music and dance moves, their style and weaves. Don't blame the media or call me mean names. Don't act like what I say is just for internet fame. This stuff is fact. Blacks have been oppressed. Cop manage every day to disarm white guys without death. Just being shady shouldn't cost men their lives. Who are doing all they knew to provide for their wives. And this is where you say not all cops are bad. If you've not exited out, I know you're boiling mad. But that logic won't stop me, and I will not be hushed. We must speak for the... You're right, the majority of cops aren't corrupt. We must speak for the voices who don't have their own, who went out one day and then never came home. Like Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, or Miss Sandra Bland, not a single one of them held a weapon in hand, and still they were killed and no justice was served. They won't get to speak their voices. They will not be heard because they are dead and buried in dirt. Their families are broken. Their deaths were absurd. Say that I'm wrong and I don't know their stories. Do you want more names? I can name at least 40. I don't want your excuses or religious bicker. It wasn't Satan who pulled the cop's trigger. I'm not against cops, so don't make this about that. These aren't opinions. These are black and white facts. This isn't about black men or white women or cops. It's about senseless behavior that on all sides must stop. Whites aren't all racist and blacks aren't all thugs. All our lives matter. We were all bought with love. To move forward from here, we all need to change behavior accepted and futures rearranged. Stop blaming them like their deaths were deserved. We all deserve death, but our lives were preserved by Christ's work on the cross. He paid for our sins so we don't have to make mistakes again and again. Don't scream and don't fight. Start walking in love. Take the masks off your eyes and remove your kid gloves. We can't change the past, but we can change what's ahead. We can change who we are so less people are dead. With accountability for our actions and a voice for our cause, we can form new statutes and create new laws. We can set things in motion and have tough conversations. We can change the future for the rest of our nation. It only takes one person to stand up and say, I won't stand for this. This is not the way. I'm not sorry for this. This is how it must be. I will be changed. Change starts with me. And I know that you guys are going to argue, and I know that you're going to comment and call me racist and call me insightful and attacking. Guys, but somebody has to stand up and say that this is not okay. These lives matter. These lives matter. These lives matter. Your children matter, my children matter, their children matter. We've got to love, and we have to accept that something is wrong, that the system is broken, that people are hurt. We have to accept that, and we have to change. We have to change. This is not a time anymore to be silent. This is not a time anymore to sweep it under the rug. And this is not a time to blame them when they're behaving poorly because they're confused and they're hurt. We have to be better. We have to accept our part. As white people, you can say this is not a color thing. You can say that it's a sin thing. You can say that it's not one versus the other. But the fact of the matter is that we as white people, we have to accept our actions. We have to accept our role in this. We have to accept where we have let them down. We have to apologize, and we have to do better. We have to do better. Black lives do matter. And it does not make me a bad person to just say Black Lives Matter. They all do. They all do. They all do. Don't change it to all lives matter. Say their lives matter. Their lives matter. Love them. Love them. And let us stand with them as our brothers and sisters and say that we will not stand for mistreatment and abuse and shameful, embarrassing, unneeded death anymore. This is not okay. And if it costs me every friend on my friends list, I will stand at the top of every mountain and I will use every bit of platform to say to whoever will listen that this is not okay. And I cannot keep living in a broken system, in a broken world, where I am weeping over deaths that were avoidable and unnecessary. Do better with me. Do better. If you think that this stuff is not true, then you are going to be part of the problem. There is a problem. We have to accept it and we have to do better. And I say this in love on all sides. Do better. We gotta love better. We've gotta love better. Please stand with me. Please. Father God, right now, I pray, God, I pray for my American brothers and sisters, God, of all colors, that we would stand together and we would love one another. I pray, God, for my family, God, in the Black community, God, that they would have peace in this time, that they would have justice and hope for a better future for them and their children. God, I pray that my white brothers and sisters, God, that my white family would accept, God, our role in this and that we would do better moving forward. Father God, make us better. Change our hearts. God, I hate racism, God, with every fiber and bone in my body. Every breath that I have, God, is against it. And I will stand against it. And I just pray that you would give me people to lock arms with me and stand against it with me. God, let us be love and light that pierces dark places and that changes the future and the history of a nation. God, we don't have to be our past. God, give us a better tomorrow. God, give us a better tomorrow. Let us be changed. Help empower us, God, that change starts with us. In Jesus' name, amen.
For those of us who do want to call ourselves being part of the solution against racism on this planet, I've got a simple test that will determine your loyalty and expose which side you're really on. If you have to make a choice between the survival of the African collective and the survival of the European collective, which side do you choose? Now, most white people who are hearing this right now are in the process, if you haven't already come up with an answer, you're in the process of coming up with some sort of rebuttal to indicate that you don't have to choose sides, that you're for everyone. Well, if you're for everyone, then you're not for Black people first. You're for creating a solution that's going to ensure your own survival. Unless you're dedicating your life to making sure that every Black person on this planet survives, and unless you're putting yourself in front of the bullet when cops are shooting innocent Black and brown people, unless you're in Africa working against the genocides that are all perpetuated by European economic imperialism, you're not doing anything to protect Black folks. And you can't conceive of a solution that doesn't involve the survival of white people. It's not that I want one group to survive over another. And if you really understood the way that African and indigenous people get down and have always gotten down on this planet, they've never been about killing other groups of people. They've never even been about taking revenge on us for all the hundreds of millions of people that we've killed. But at some point, if you had to make that choice, 99.999999% of you would never choose any solution that could possibly lead to you or your family not surviving this. White liberals will only support a solution to the problem that involves the survival of white people, and not just physically, financially. How many of you are willing to dedicate your entire life to ending racism? When you get an inheritance based on the opportunities that your grandparents had, or your great-grandparents had, or the murders that your ancestors committed, the land that they stole, the labor that they stole that they never repaid back, Wall Street that was built on the back, in fact, the entire economic foundations of the European collective that was built on the back of enslaving and exploiting everyone else on the planet, that allowed you to receive that inheritance. Are you willing to share that money? Or do you feel you don't owe it because you're not a racist? Let me tell you something. White supremacy is not even about racism anymore. White supremacy is about power. It's about control. It's about money. It's ownership of resources. And yeah, sure, a lot of us are racist. There's a lot of white people who hate black people. There's a lot of white people who fear black people. Most of us do. But at the end of the day, we could all love black people. We could have black friends. We could, all of that. But are you willing to give up the money? The stolen money? The money that your family stole? You could unlearn all of your unconscious biases as much as you can. You can learn how to treat black people with respect in the office. You can go to protests. You can do all of that, but unless you're willing to part with the resources that were stolen from African people, from indigenous people on this planet, then you're holding on to stolen property, and therefore you are part of the white collective. You are part of the white supremacist pan-European collective. And it's time that we stop lying about this shit.